Hello friends. In this video today, I'm going to talk about how to find out who owns a property. Have you ever driven by a property and thought, man, I wish I know who owned that property? Matter of fact, most of you don't realize you can actually find out who owns any property. And today, I'll not only tell you how to do it, but why that's important. So in this video today, I'm going to tell you how to find out who owns a property, but also why that's important, and knowing that as a real estate investor, how that can benefit you. I'll actually go over with you a couple of tools that I really love. Some are free, some might cost a little bit of money, but they actually show you who owns a property and gives you very extensive details. Finally, I want to help you realize that when you do encounter a property and it's not somebody's name, but it's under a company, how to find out who that underlying owner is, even if it's masked by an LLC or a company that owns that property. You guys ready? Let's go. First off, why do we want to know who owns a property? Well, number one, it empowers you as an investor. It gives you additional information when making an offer on a property. For example, let's say you come across a property and it looks really run down. You might say, my goodness, this is a property that I would love to acquire. I think I could do this or that to it to really spruce it up, fix and flip, rehab it, and then rent it out or turn around and flip it. But maybe it's the renter who's actually degrading the property, and maybe the owner doesn't even know what's happening with it, right? So having that information can really empower you as an investor. And once you know who owns that property, it might be really valuable. You could do some additional investigation, not to be a stalker, but you could go on social media and maybe see a little bit more about that person and a little bit about their life story. Now, there was a time when I had invested some money with an individual. I had started to do really well in real estate, took some money, did an investment with a gentleman. He'd taken the money and invested in a property down in Arizona, and he was going to parlay that into another property. And it had got stuck in a situation where I couldn't get the money out. And so I was kind of upset. So I had a conversation with the gentleman. He says, listen, I've got a property up here on the river that I'm willing to give to you. I thought, man, that is awesome. So we drove the property, we looked at it. It was a dream property, tons of trees right on the water, something that I would definitely have exchanged my money for this property. But something wasn't adding up. So I went in, I found out who actually owned the property, and guess what? It wasn't the guy who owed me the money, right? And so that helped me as an individual for my next conversation with him to realize that he didn't even have the ability to offer that property to me. Now, when I confronted him about that, he had said that it was his partner and still make it happen. But guess what? Still to date, I don't own that property. And knowing who owned it empowered me as an investor. So how do you find out who owns a property? Well, there's a handful of different tools out there. One of the easiest one that's almost available anywhere you go online is a GIS data form. GIS stands for Geographical Information System. If you go to your county, or if you Google GIS county for a certain county, most likely it'll pull this up. As you get to that page, it'll show you the county, and you can start zooming in. The closer you get to a specific property, you're gonna be able to click on that property, and it's gonna give you details on who owns that property. Now, there's usually an additional more details tab. If you click on that, it's going to give you a ton of information about that property, maybe the value, maybe the deeds, a lot of information that'll empower you as an investor, and it's free on most county websites. Another one is actually a hunting app. It's called Onyx Hunt, and it's one that I really like. It's an app on your phone, so you don't have to be on a computer, you don't have to go to a county website. You pull up the app and you click on a property, and it tells you almost like the GIS who owns it. Now, there are variations for this app. To have access to one state, you're looking at $30 a year. To have access to 2 states, you're looking at about $45 a year. But to have unlimited access, you're $100 a year. So for $100, you can get access at your fingertips on your phone to any property in the United States by clicking on that, going to the city, zooming in, clicking on the property, and it'll pull up the data that you need. Now, that app that I just talked about, it's kind of addicting. I love water properties. I love rivers. I love lakes. So there's times where I've gone in, I've looked at that app, and I find out who's owned property on the river. Have I used it to my benefit yet? Not yet for those river properties. A lot of times it seems like they're not for sale, but it's nice to know who owns them. And I start to make a log on my computer about who owns certain properties where and on which rivers, which lakes. So if there is a time where it comes for sale, I'll have a little more information. The third tool is something called skip tracing. Now, what is that? Have you heard of skip tracing? It sounds a little bit interesting. Skip tracing, as it applies to real estate, is the process of tracking down an absentee owner or a hard to reach homeowner whose property you're interested in buying. Skip tracing really can be an effective way to land off-market deals. So how does it work? There are a lot of softwares out there that use skip tracing. One of my favorite ones is one called RealFlow. I'm not saying go out and buy that software for you to find skip tracing, but it has a CRM built into it, has a deal analysis, it even delivers leads to you, right? So as I talked about, technology nowadays can be a vital tool for a real estate investor. But skip tracing is interesting because it's nationwide. You can go in there once you have service or once you have one of these softwares, you can click on a property. Not only does it show you who owns the property, but it also analyzes deals for you compared to other properties in that same area. Skip tracing has become a very vital tool for a real estate investor to have if they want to find who owns a property and comparing that to other deals. As I mentioned, it can help you land off-market deals. What does that mean? Properties that necessarily aren't for sale yet, skip tracing can give you information maybe on late payments, pre-foreclosure, or foreclosure. And those are opportunities to go in and take a property at maybe less than it's actually worth to help solve a problem. It's interesting with skip tracing. I think there's companies that have gotten really good at it. When I was first getting started in real estate investing, like I said, I looked everywhere. I found a property in Holbrook, Arizona, 5 acres that I bought off eBay. Of all places. You probably remember when eBay was a big deal back in the early 2000s. Well, I bought this 5 acres in Holbrook, Arizona for $800. And I still own it today. Occasionally, I will get letters from individuals who will send me say, hey, we noticed you have property here. We would love to purchase your property. We're willing to purchase it for X amount. Go ahead and sign below and the contract is valid. I've seen this in action where people on a large scale will go and find properties for skip tracing and they will send out direct mail to individual owners. Or that's another reason why it's important who owns a property. You can actually make an offer to them via email, phone, or actual direct mail. And finally, the last way to find out who owns a property is probably the easiest, and it's one that's tried and true, right? It's going and knocking on doors. A lot of people call this term driving for dollars. As you're driving, you look at a property and think, man, I would like to know who owns that property. But a little trick to that, maybe not going to the actual house, but going to the neighbor's house. If the home looks run down, it looks distressed, you could go to the neighbor and just kind of say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I'm potentially looking at buying some homes in the neighborhood. This home next to you looks like one that would fit my profile as an investor. Do you know who owns that? Because what I do is I typically will buy them, rehab them, fix them up, and rent them or sell them. Now as the neighbor, they're thinking, oh great, I'm tired of seeing this clunky property over here next to me. And honestly, they might give you more information than you want. And finally, you're gonna come across some properties that when you click on them or you find out who owns them, it isn't an individual, it's an LLC, a limited liability company. Most seasoned investors will buy a property with what's called a limited liability company. And it does just that. It limits your liability. Why would you do that? Well, it separates your personal assets from your business assets through a corporation versus you as an individual. But it might be hard to find out who owns that. The simple way to do that is just go to your Secretary of State website for the state that you live in or where the LLC is at and type in the name of that entity, and chances are it'll pull up the owner of that property. So hopefully we've covered enough ground here for you to understand why it's important to understand who owns property, why you need to know that, and different tools to help you do so. I'm excited to hear if you have any thoughts or any comments of other tools that you've used that have helped you find who owns a property. And don't forget, as always, I've got a free gift for you. I've got my Airbnb, my short-term analyzer. When you put in the data, it spits out for you whether it's a good deal or not. It's tons of information, tons of knowledge I've gained over the years put into one calculator. Normally I offer this for $100, but it's a free gift for you. Click below, aaronsfreetraining.com. Thank you.